Let me just make the point now before I forget that one of the things that I discovered during my dissertation research was on the four ways of knowing, the way we generate knowledge. That there is the formal presentational knowledge is represents knowledge of the head, the sage on the stage, formal propositional logic, and that's sort of a traditional view of the experience of learning. Experiential learning is the learning that comes from actually doing things and trying them on and learning in practice. That you can read forever about the purpose of hammers, but there's something special about that you learn about hammering once you first start hammering nails. I think Mark Twain also said something like, a man who carries a live cat by the tail learns something about cats. Uh, Presentational knowledge is a third way of knowing, and that has to do with what you learn when you actually try to tell somebody something. So you could learn book learning and you could experience that book learning through practice. But when you're trying to tell somebody something about what it is, let's say that we want to carve a bowl, a wooden bowl. And you start off on this side of the bowl as a novice, and then through practice, you continue to carve that bowl until you get over here till you're an expert in wooden bowl carving. And all of the experiential learning that you did along the way, carving many bowls, goes into the knowledge base that you have. And you probably had some books and a database and whatever, YouTube, and you learned about the art of carving wooden bowls. And then the next novice comes along and you try to tell them what it's like to carve the bowl. And that's less than perfect because you're talking about bowl cutting and carving from your perspective, and which takes into account your journey. And it's only that act of communication that helps you remember what it was like to see it from the novice's side. And until that expert kind of walks back around the bowl and then joins the novice, and then together they consider the bowl, and then the expert finds ways to tell the story of bowl cutting through words or imagery or whatever it may be. And so in the martial arts, one of the reasons you have to be a teacher in order to get to the higher belt rankings is to, as a forcing function in some ways, to remember what it's like to cultivate beginner's mind, to see it in a new way. And then when you remember what that's like, you now get to see that bowl once again from a new perspective, and you end up climbing that mountain of knowledge in a spiral way where you go around and around that wooden bowl to be cut, and each spiral you end up having that new empathy and memory and connection to all the other folks on the journey. And so presentational knowledge turns out to be the knowledge that you gain, which can only come from the effort to teach and to tell somebody else our writing and speaking. That process of self-discovery reminds us that writing is thinking, that speaking is thinking, and that thinking is learning, and learning is hard. That comes from unconscious competence and many, many repetitions. There are things that you learn at a root level that you only learn from getting many repetitions. Like your body will learn how to adjust your pace and your step on a road march if you get a little pebble in your boot. You'll just unconsciously make some changes in how you walk without even thinking about it. And so we know from research that something like 70 or 80% of the knowledge that you're walking around with is at the unconscious or subconscious level that's been ingrained into you from practice. without even your conscious awareness, which can only focus on 2 to 7 things at a time. And meanwhile, your unconscious or subconscious brain is processing things, and then it nominates certain things to your conscious awareness when it becomes a trigger or an alert. So we often find ourselves doing things as a result of a feeling or a gut instinct. So these 4 ways of knowing need to be integrated in a way that helps us understand all the things that we learn. And so part of this pairing and sharing is an effort to get outside of your own head, to get outside of your presentational knowledge, to experience that collaborative peer learning and the experience of learning through trying to tell somebody what you're thinking about. And then in that iron sharpens iron approach, the presentational knowledge should come to pass, and then that intersection of A and B generates new forms of knowledge. And then when you do that a lot, you end up learning how to do that, how to collaborate, how to easily and seamlessly work together on a team to form teams and get things done. And it's an acquired skill. It's a form of craft knowledge, and typically the most powerful learning experience in the eyes of students over the course of the year is this opportunity to work on real problems with their peers and just engage in the world. So this is part of that learning process that we're on, and I want to acknowledge, the literature on learning theory and adult learning and collaborative learning, because we propose that our teams are not just collections of individuals, but they are something like there's some synergy that happens when we're working together. So thanks for getting us started, and I know we're eager to listen to whoever the next person may be. I know I am. Next, just grab the mic.
Yeah, I'll go. This is Captain Brinson. So one of my favorite things about peer reviews is you get to see somebody else's thought process, right? So you may have an idea of the way that you want a topic to go, but when you start to see how your peers are writing on the same topic, you can either validate that you're going down the right path, or you may have the ability to say, hey, I'm kind of missing something here with what the assignment is. The other thing that, with peer review is, I think one of the hardest things that we can do is tell somebody that, hey, this isn't very good, or at worst, you suck, right? Fix this. So these are great opportunities for us to kind of challenge each other. And the last thing I would say about this specific review is it gives you kind of an idea, in a sense, of where you need to improve, right? Because it's very rapid fire, very quick, hey, come up with this idea. And when you look at different topics, you may find that your topic wasn't a good topic, or it may spark during this pre-writing process something that you didn't think of previously. So overall, I think it's, that peer review process is a very good opportunity to learn.
Yeah, give me some insights into the problem area that's emerging for you, and then maybe specifics on your collaboration.
Yeah, so I picked essentially that the Army needs to retool the IBCT MTO to fight and win in a complex world. So this is from personal experience. I commanded a battery in an IBCT, and the MTO and manning just is not built to sustain itself, to maintain itself, and more importantly, to protect itself against a near-peer threat. And the kind of avenues I'm looking for is more robust surface-to-air ADA assets, and the inclusion of creating a new way that the Army thinks of combined arms by adding a striker battalion to replace one of the light infantry battalions to allow, specifically like for an IBCTA, the ability to expand the lodgement further to open the airhead line. And I think that new version of combined arms fight, specifically if you're talking about the Northern European or the Eastern European plane, it'll give you an element of speed that doesn't exist right now with an IBCTA. Over.
Yeah, IBCT is too slow to run, too light to fight. Needs metal. Yeah, I like your ideas on the peer review. One of the principles that we want to espouse is the active courage that it takes to place your best thinking in the moment on the table for others to consider. You know, people are taller or shorter, faster or slower, but our inner thoughts, our actual beliefs, and what we stand for, that is to reveal all of that, to be transparent about what you actually think and expose those ideas to the world to see, is an act of emotional and personal courage, which should not be underestimated. And so one of the ways you get up that spiral of excellence, on a team and a collaboration, is that feeling of safety and trust that my ideas are offered to others for the benefit of the team. And that when we put the idea on the table, that that is an act of respect, that I respect you enough to tell you exactly what it is that I'm thinking, my current best thinking. I'm not saying that that's what I'm always going to think, but that's where I am right now. And so, in order to respect that act of courage and preparation, that offer, that gift of your genuine thought, I'm going to treat that idea on the table with respect by giving it my best work, my full attention. I'm going to offer critical thinking and creative thinking and professional thinking and practical thinking with the idea of improving the idea on the table through dialogue and discourse. And that's the way I communicate respect to you, by taking you seriously and giving you my best work when I'm discussing that idea that's on the table. So when we're doing that, we've got to be absolutely clear that the discussion and disagreements or the agreements, all of that dialogue is with the purpose of trying to improve the idea on the table, so that each person that's around that table is enriched by it. So we can communicate that in the way that we treat each other with professional and personal courtesy and respect, but also that we take each other seriously, in that we're going to bring our best work to the table. Now, we will develop social and professional and personal norms when it comes to that in the classroom. It just happens because we're mammals. And we will have habitual ways of acting. We've got to be mindful of how we went through the process of building those norms, the old storming, norming, transforming, and performing process. And we've got to learn how we did that and what went right and what went wrong and how can we do it better. And then recognize that every new situation that we go into is going to have some of those elements, and that some of the things that we assume will work for us may not work for somebody else that's coming from a different culture, language, perspective, doesn't have that same baked into the cake trust and confidence that we will have earned all the way through. So we want to be humbly aware that even while we may be focusing about the idea on the table, that we never lose sight of the act of courage that it took for someone to invest in us, for the opportunity to expose their thinking, and to be mindful of the human in the room on the other side of the table, and communicate our feelings about that person, the emotional intelligence, the emotional awareness that goes into team building, and high performance teams account for that. They recognize that it's part of the operating environment. So, um, thank you for the opportunity to remember all of that. Yeah, the IBCT, an interesting organization, and there's a lot of different ways that we can look at addressing some of the requirements that you've described: sustain and maintain, force protection, and then all the different ways in which we might do that. Um, so that one will be fun. So thanks a lot. And next,
Hey, sir, Major Chris Johns here. Make sure you can hear
fire.
me. Okay, sir, I chose the lack of manpower and consistency at the Army National Guard mission training complexes. Um, currently, the 6 mission training complexes are manned by a mixture of Title 10 Army National Guardsmen and ADOS, with only one Department of Army civilian at one of the 6 MTCs. Mission command is vital to the war fight. It's how commanders maintain command and control, and without the continuity of DACs at the MTCs, mission failure is possible. With the approval of DAC authorizations, we achieve continuity of operations and an in-depth knowledge base. I went over this with Danny, Jamie, very insightful, and took the the lens of an Army National Guardsman, and talking to Danny, she was unaware of the struggles that we have in Army National Guard when it comes to manpower at the MTCs. So explaining it to her from that point of view, was helpful to the both of us. Being able to expound on the challenges that we face.
Okay. This one will end up exploring the root problems that cause the manpower shortage. We won't have to spend a lot of time proving that there are shortages and that there's consequences, but the reasons the status quo is so powerful is that the status quo represents a decision to make trade-off decisions with previous knowledge and information. So there was something that went into the trade-off decisions which made the status quo the best of a set of unpleasant choices. And so when we start thinking about possible solutions for manpower shortages, military plus up, civilian plus up, additional duties, contracting, you could unit taskings, replacing personnel with virtual resources, because that always works. So there's a bunch of things that will go into considerations of possible solutions, and then sorting out the criteria in which to make those trade-off decisions will end up being crucial. And so you want to spend some time before you get into your preferred solution, is it that you understand your criteria for judgment later on, so that you don't pick a solution and then craft criteria that makes that win against all other solutions, foreign and domestic. And so we want to, before the cement or the concrete hardens, we want to make sure that we've locked in legit criteria to make those trade-off decisions, which are going to inform solutions and how to get to those manpower shortages. Okay, so thanks. Next.
Hey, sir. Eric Trudell here.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to sustain this for 16 of you, but we'll try. Go ahead.
All right, sir. So the problem, I'm proposing is that the Army has an overall lack of experienced military justice litigators, and the majority of prosecutions are being handled by captains with limited experience in contested courts-martial. And the vast majority of contested courts-martial are for your most serious charges. You're talking about murder, sex assault, domestic violence, child sex assault, child pornography. And a lot of these cases are being handled by, prosecutors that have maybe 1 or 2 contested courts-martial under their belt, the way that the Army set up their, the prosecution track. So, I mean, it's not an indictment of the JAG Corps. The fact that we have a success rate of about 30% in sex assault cases. I mean, we take a lot of cases that civilians never would. And it's not, I don't blame political pressure. I blame a desire to have victims get their day in court, more so than the civilians who really just care about their successful prosecution rate. So the way you solve this problem, I think the infrastructure is already there as far as duty positions. You're just gonna have to kind of reorganize a little bit. So you make an actual prosecution career track, which allows people to specialize. You have captains come in, they start kind of early on with simple cases, your larcenies, your drug cases, as they slowly advance to try the more difficult cases. So, I mean, I think it's doable. I think it would allow for less clumsy prosecutions. I think our cases are well prosecuted, but they could always be better. And obviously, with the end goal of justice in every case, I think experienced prosecutors more able to navigate the addition of special victims counsel. Now you have SVCs for not only sex assaults, but also domestic violence. And a lot of times SVCs are more experienced than the prosecutors that are actually handling the case. So it would allow for actually to get some real experience in the courtroom. Like I said, just to help for more efficient prosecutions. I think it'd speed things up, and prosecutions would be handled just better overall.
Yeah, this is part of the dynamic of development versus production and the assignments that we take. You think about a lieutenant in a rifle platoon. Here's how good the NCO Corps is. The NCO Corps is so good that you can take a second lieutenant and make him the platoon leader, and yet the rifle platoon will still be an amazing mission accomplishment organization. That's how good that sergeant first class is. He can not only ensure the platoon is prepared and accomplishes missions, but he can also develop a lieutenant as an additional duty. So in some ways, officer assignments, you stay there just long enough to get proficient, and then it's time to move you into a new position in order to broaden you. So in some ways, you could say we're always in positions for the developmental experience and not so much for the efficient production of expert practice. Like if by the time I became a good rifle platoon leader, it was time to leave. Whereas I would have been a really good rifle platoon leader if I'd stayed there another 3 or 4 or 5 years, perhaps, but then at the expense of some other. So in the case of developing good senior JAG officers, we want to make sure that they go through a set of broadening experiences so that they can give commanders the full range of their experiential learning. But along the way, in these cases of serious crimes, it could manifest that you got the inexperienced kid going up against a fully trained and developed specialist on the defense, which could lead to the troublesome success rate, and then justice is not achieved, even though we were trying to develop officers. Maybe the cause of justice is not achieved, and so in the same way that the root cause analysis and the trade-off analysis of how did we get the path that we have, well, there's reasons, and so those are legit reasons. That's the elephant in the room that we've got to address. So every proposal for change that you make has to account for the impact on all of the other things that are harmed by the proposed change that you make. And so we want to do some kind of net analysis that says that overall what we get is better. So there's a number of different ways to skin that cat. I'm going to try to remember the kid from 15D last year who was looking at career paths for JAGs, and I can't remember if he did his MMAS, but I will remember this in time. But this is an interesting area. It gets into talent management and career path mapping for an organization and the law of large numbers. If I have X number of lawyers, certainly I want to put an excess of them on a bus and then drive that bus off a cliff. But with lawyers that are still around. I got to make sure that I've addressed the need for specialty skill development in the force, as well as the general skill development. So I'm looking at a way to blend that for the entire force. What may be good for the force may not be the best thing for any individual. I'm not saying that every lawyer has to have the same path. So we've got to figure out how to do a force mix. There's a lot of logisticians in this room. So when we created the log corps, we had to sort out multifunctional logistics and give everybody some transportation, some ordnance maintenance, and some supply, transportation, maintenance, and supply. But at the same time, that came at the cost of developing deep expertise in the officer corps in each of those three branches. So there's a trade-off decision that you make when you're looking at skill mixtures. Danny's going to talk about that in a little bit, probably when it comes to cyber, but this is the same experience that the JAG Corps is going through. And there may be something in the medical profession with Profis where we have contractual arrangements to bring in specialists as needed. That may be a similar idea to explore. So thanks for that, Eric. Good job. And next.
Thanks, sir. Danny here. You already kind of know my topic, just for everyone else. So what I'm looking at is the cyber critical resource of the fire team. And so kind of the way that I approach this is, well, first I have actually been thinking about this a long time. It's something that we are working on in the cyber branch, specifically on the offensive side, because of the niche skill sets for the fire team specifically. Yesterday I kind of pre-wrote, did some wargaming with Dr. Long, and then after that I used my whiteboard and started basically writing all of the things that are impacting. What are all the causes of why this is why is it a critical resource? Why do we have all these problems? Being able to have this resource fully manned, trained, and equipped. And then after that, I showed my Chris was actually who reviewed my stuff, and so I showed him my whiteboard, which was extremely difficult to read, and then I kind of prepped him with, hey, this is what I'm thinking about, and then I wrote out my and so basically just to kind of give you guys what I'm looking at here is Army Cyber is unable to meet the critical resource requirement for the offensive cyber fire team. And why this is important is cannot conduct any operations without the fire team. The fire team has to be fully manned, trained, and fully qualified. And due to the limited resources that we have, with also the increased demand for mission, we're unable to, achieve the results that we actually need. And over time, it's going to cause issues. And so if we're able to get to a resolution on this, what it does is enables the cyber force to execute missions with fully trained and qualified, be manned above the critical levels, improve retention for highly technical and unique skill sets, decrease long-term expenditures, and also increase the quality of life for that critical resource. And so the critical resource is obviously a person, so that's why we talk about quality of life. And then if we don't do this, if we don't come up with a resolution, then the cyber teams become non-mission capable. We continue to lose talent and aren't able to retain that. We're wasting funding that we're receiving because of how much it costs to train these individuals. And then you increase stress levels, which create other health and personal issues for that critical resource. One of the things that we kind of talked about between Chris and I was, if there was one thing you could fix today, what would it be? And the problem is that it all centers around talent management, but it goes more into that because it requires a full revamp of talent management from inception through retirement, the recruitment process, the training process, the ad-con, op-con management, which is a nightmare. And then, there's one MOS that covers multiple work roles that have all different skill sets. So creating a more distributed MOS. And then it also career progression. Unfortunately, cyber's initial take at career progression was modeled off the traditional approach in all the ranks, warrant officer, officer, and NCO. And we would have to take a different career progression approach, in addition to putting all of that into our retention model and getting leadership all on the same page and dedicating some leadership to managing this entire process. Because right now it's managed between two different brigades, HRC, the branch. It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the non-traditional challenge of force management when it may be that the best recruit is a tattooed cyberpunk anarchist who turns out to be your best cyber asset. So imagine the leadership challenge of acculturating that guy to instilling him with values that we would recognize without jeopardizing what makes him the unique asset that he is. How do I manage that? Is that by contract? Is he a warrant officer? Is he a civilian hire? And then how do I train the leaders to develop those guys and trust that leader to ride herd on that kid? So there's some non-traditional talent management challenges that come to this area that may not fit the traditional Army model. So there's clearly some personnel management, there's leadership and education and doctrine and policy and funding and recruitment. All of those things go into the different choices we might have. So this will be interesting. Now, your challenge and my challenge will be for you to be able to say that in less than 2 minutes this afternoon. So
yes,
thank you for all of that. And now we have to kill everybody.
Yes. So I also want to just kind of let everyone know, so some of this stuff I obviously will not be able to talk to on Blackboard, and some of it I will be able to talk to when we move into Teams. And then when we're there in person and we can get in a skiff, if you want to know more, I would gladly talk about it. I have a huge passion for cyber as a branch. And so I could literally talk all day about it, but I have rehearsed a 2-minute, here's my spiel. So I will take on that challenge this afternoon.
Well, we will be the judge of you. Trust us. So thanks, Danny. Next.
Hey, sir, it's Josh here. Can you hear me?
5 by 5.
Yes, sir. So shameless medical plug. So my topic and my problem statement is how does the Army reshape its medical professionals to provide longer sustainable care at the point of injury to better support the warfighter? So to kind of break it down, I'm trying to further push along the death of the golden hour type process. So through the past 2 decades, the United States military has attained air superiority. So the advantage is the U.S. military has been able to extract the patients in a timely manner and receive resuscitative care during wartime. So you see this during the CTC rotations. A lot of the times, the first line responders on ground, whether that's PAs, medics, whatnot, they hurry up, provide interventions, and then push to a higher level of care because we have that luxury of air superiority to push them out in a timely manner. However, in a near peer fight, air superiority is not a given. So the first line supervisors need to be able to stay on those patients a lot longer, be able to apply multiple interventions at a time, clean the wounds multiple times, sterilize their equipments and whatnot. I think the risk of not doing so could be greater loss of life into any war type environment as well. And then I had a couple examples of how to go about it. Revamp the Mystic training centers to execute prolonged field care scenarios. Patients are already treated, and then they have to reapply those interventions, take them off, put them on. Talk about irregular medicine. You're not going to have those sexy items of like gauzes, bandages, and whatnot. You have to use your belt, clothing that's on you, anything that's around you to sustain that life, as well as and then the difficulty is like sterilizing equipment. You're not going to get those equipment in a timely manner. You have to use that equipment maybe 2-3 times, several times. So how do you sterilize that equipment while you're out in the field? But I mean, it's an important topic because it prolongs. Not only are we trying to win our wars effectively, but we're also trying to sustain greater amounts of life than our soldiers as well. That's what I had, sir.
Yeah, this is a great topic. About 3 or 4 years ago, we had Medical Service Corps officer did an MMAS to unpack the origination of the golden hour policy. Turns out there's no science behind it, but it was more of a briefing slogan and had a lot of good reasons. And it drives us, however, to constrain operations in certain ways in order to achieve the promises of the golden hour. There's other more important factors that go into how to deliver the appropriate care in that reverse supply chain from point of injury back to definitive care. And so you've hit on all the right topics in there. It turned out that the officer MMAS was so good that we sent it up to the Office of the Surgeon General, who read it, and they changed his follow-on assignment to work on exactly on that topic. I also had an MMAS, I think 2 or 3 years ago, where the officer was taking a look specifically at the things that we could do to incorporate special ops in-flight medical treatments and more broadly distribute those in the force in order to extend the window of stabilizing before a guy could get to definitive care. So I think if we look at this as a reverse supply chain and look at all of the points of intervention, then we can start sorting out some low risk, high payoff opportunities that could add together to change the formula in our favor. The whole idea is that we don't want to arbitrarily or artificially constrain operational choices because of a unscientific or unjustified policy that restricts us to on the basis of an hour of flight on the aircraft. So I'm looking forward to doing this. I want to work with you, I think, on modeling the reverse supply chain for CASEVAC so that we can do something in the form of a simple simulation or board game or something where we can visualize all of the management at each echelon in the pipeline. So this is a good one I'm fired up about. Steve Smith, SMITH, Steve Smith is our smart guy in DESFIM. He's fully vetted in Medical Service Corps, so I would expect you'll end up meeting him at some point. So thanks, Josh. Good stuff. All in.
Hey, sir, it's Mike McEwen. I guess I'll go next. So, as Danny was talking about cyber distributing MOSs, I'm going to argue the exact opposite for the Patriot portion of air defense. So, in my experience, again, we're still highly deployed right now in this time compared to other units. We're usually about 1 year on to about 18 months off, and that seems to be our cycle we're on a continuous basis. So basically, we tend to rob Peter to pay Paul for units due to our undermanning of pretty much all of our battalions across the board for Patriot. So In a Patriot unit, there's really three MOSs, two that I consider combined to one. One is the operator of the system, and the other one is the launcher station operator and maintainer. The issue we're having right now is that the 14 Echoes, which operate the Patriot system, long story short, is a very technical job. It requires a lot more training. The majority of those guys, after they've done it for 4 or 5 years, probably as in cyber, do other things. They become a warrant officer, or they get out and work in the civilian sector and go to Raytheon or something like that. The 14 Tangos, which are the launching station operators, they stick around for the long term, which in turn become better leaders, become better NCOs, and so on and so forth. So on the 14 Echo side is one platoon, the 14 Tango is another platoon. The 14 Echoes have very, very, very few NCOs. They're mostly all junior soldiers. So basically, in gist, what I'm recommending is that have a one MOS that combines the 14 Echo and 14 Tango, which will allow us to be a lot more versatile in placing those soldiers that, again, were constantly undermanned anyways, into the essential positions without the need to continuously cross-train every single time we get a new soldier. I'm sure Mike Balaban can agree with this a little bit, but I've always had 14 Tangos doing 14 Echo jobs, and I've had 14 Echoes that could not do their jobs, that have done other jobs inside the battery because they just can't, even though they've been trained from a technical aspect, can't perform their job. In addition to this is obviously a strategic weapon system that COCOMs are always asking for. We're constantly trying to increase our battalions across the board, which in turn is either going to lower our manning that we currently have, or it's just going to continue, spread across the board. So, long story short, combine those MOS that I think will allow more versatility, possibly lowering the entrance requirements for the Patriot system, not so much the secret clearance, but the entrance requirements to help fill those slots as well.
Great. Yeah, so there's a lot of ideas that are surfaced in this one. One of them I want to talk about is the theory of constraints by Elihu Goldratt. And what Goldratt says is that in any manufacturing process, you have a number of stages, and that at each stage there's a flow rate or a production capacity, and that the overall performance of the system is limited by wherever the constraint is. So one of the things we want to do is find the constraint. So in this case, and then manage the constraint, and then add resources to the constraint so that we can achieve the maximum possible flow through. So in this case, it looks like the 14 echoes are the limiting factor in the sustainable op tempo for that branch and for those units. And there's different ways that we might try to relax that constraint or to find more resources. MOS realignment and consolidation and lifecycle management is certainly one of them. It could be something as simple as going back to the COCOMs and the demand rate and finding alternative means of resourcing the requirement that doesn't place such a premium. It could just simply, we got to buy more of them. We got to have more units, and then we got to trade off some other force structure to increase the the number of units. That's always a difficult one. So this is one where the role of the proponent at the ADA School and Center is so crucial in that 2-star is responsible to the Chief of Staff of the Army for all of the trade-off decisions that go into the design, management, and resourcing of that particular branch. So certainly taking a look at the proponent's background on this should reveal some interesting ideas about manning, MOS management, MTO development, and then the rules that we use for producing the ready forces that we need, manpower just being one of them. It may be that there's some system equipment design that we can do that makes it easier to maintain so that we don't have such a requirement for technical expertise. And maybe that helps us with the MOS consolidation. So a lot of interesting practical ideas in there. This is typical of the work that majors do in the Army to drill deep into possible solutions to explore the solution space. So looking forward to this one. This will this one will be a challenge for us as we think about protecting the force, because uh, the ADA umbrella is the non-negotiable setting conditions and setting the theater that permits everything else to happen. If you think about a force projection army, we're going to be constrained by the points of entry. And so those are the choke points. Those are the constraints in the supply chain that builds ready forces. And so those become lucrative targets for the enemy's limited capacity to interdict with missiles and rockets and so forth. So now that ADA protection umbrella is central to all of the things that happen downstream. So that's why theory of constraints is going to help us with this one, to look for those choke points. When you have choke points, that becomes a high priority for protection, because the enemy can see that as well as we can if they're smart. So thanks, Mike. This one will be fun. Next.
All right, sir. Captain Balaban, I'll follow up with his topic, and I'll be talking on our air defense issue. So kind of going about trying to figure it out. I first started out with the, I want to say it's the Army's first 6 priorities, and one of them was like, I know number 1's like precision fires, and then we moved into air defense being, I want to say, number 5 on the list. It's kind of very large, so I kind of narrowed it down specifically to air defense. So what I came up with was ADA deployments are currently unsustainable, and the air defense force is rapidly approaching burnout. This problem has been exacerbated through the 4 deployments of ADA force and the emergence of the multi-domain operations. The lack of AMD units to provide protection to the force will put the nation at risk. Mitigation can be achieved through the development, modernization, and the growth of AMD battalions. Failure to address this issue will lead to a hollowed-out AMD force unable to support the nation. Before I came with that statement, I do a lot of, a lot of it was based on my own personal experience, but I had to go back and do a little research and pull up a couple of documents that kind of support my thought process, along with where we're going today. But in doing an analysis, kind of a two-pronged problem set, kind of mentioned before, with the personnel manning issue, but also with the fact that we've been running equipment for forward deployed for deterrence and keeping the S pods and A pods open for such a long time, for over 20, I think it's like 25 years, because we got units forward deployed in UCOM, CENTCOM, INDOPACOM, and also units within like OCONUS as well, constantly in demand to provide the services to the nation for what we're designed to do. I had a major, sorry if I butcher your name, Vidira review, and he said my first one was a little bit too long, so I kind of chopped it down and removed a lot of the numbers and data to it, and came with that short blurb, sir.
Yeah, so this one sounds more like the top-down approach to the general problem of force protection. So if the bottoms-up sharp focus on 14 Echo versus 14 Tango is one end of the spectrum, this may be at the larger area. Just make sure you're coordinating and have a clear distinction in the area of focus. So in order to fix things in the Army, at some point we got to have very clear boundaries about scoping and shaping, and then say, hey, inside the problem that I have framed, then this is how I'm going to explore it. So just spend some time getting that done. It may be that you find yourself looking at the way we protect the force at key nodes strategically as members of the joint forces, or something in the way the joint force handles port protection that maybe is unfair. Why is that the Army mission to do that? What about that Aegis ship? So it wouldn't surprise me to see you encounter some joint doctrinal implications on this one as well. So looking forward to this one. Protection is going to be one of our big themes this year. Thank you, sir.
Hey, sir, this is Captain Gal. I'm just doing a quick comms check.
Good to go.
Sir, so for the problem I looked at, I kind of wanted to stay away from my branch in the Signal Corps, and I kind of wanted to look at the Army's current method of PCSing soldiers, especially junior leaders, every few years, I feel like it's extremely taxing on the force and has several drawbacks. Not only is it kind of a heavy burden on soldiers and their families, but I believe that it hinders growth in individual expertise across the force. By moving soldiers as soon as they become familiar with their MOSs and their jobs, and kind of has a potential for losing talent. So what I kind of propose is the idea of kind of stabilizing soldiers based off geographic areas or unit type, where I believe the Army can kind of better develop leaders who are familiar with their units, their location, and who can easier apply their unique skill sets within their organization. So, for example, if soldiers who are primarily stationed in Europe kind of remain in the European theater, where they become kind of regional experts within the region. And I believe that has huge tactical benefits and can play huge dividends in the future. Soldiers who are primarily from heavy units, they stay heavy, or airborne units stay light, that kind of stuff. Soldiers on the West Coast kind of remain on the West Coast. So not only does that kind of decrease the cost for large moves for the force, but it also increases regional expertise, more proficiency among the individual, and kind of improves individual and unit morale. It's less taxing on soldiers, their families, etc. By stabilizing soldiers, especially junior leaders, based off kind of geographic areas and the unit type, I believe the Army can better develop leaders who are more familiar with their units, their location, and like I said, how to apply their unique skill sets with their organization. And I believe it has kind of a ripple effect with multiple benefits. While I still believe that needs of the Army still come first, and maybe senior leaders can kind of be exempt to that. I believe that junior soldiers and junior leaders, I believe that it would benefit the force by keeping those guys kind of regionally aligned by geographic area. Over.
Yeah, so the unskilled commentator would say, hey, why is that an issue of combat power, about how we take care of families and station? I'm concerned about practical performance on the battlefield. Why are you spending time and effort on a peripheral matter that's a simple matter of administration? So you need to be able to dispense with that argument in about 5 seconds. When you first said PCS process, I thought this was going to how we can just do household goods better and funding, but really it kind of morphed into a more of a regimental system or regionality approach. So there's a couple thought experiments. What's been the Marine Corps' experience with focusing on regions, and the UK's regimental system, in which the stability and familiarity with a subset of the Army builds proficiency and teamwork and SOP. We've not adopted that by and large in order to ensure that we don't get stovepiped, that whether we think there's a certain value to the cross training and the multiple experiences, like going to many different divisions, as opposed to staying in your division or your regiment until you get promoted out of it. So there are some thoughts out there in the field that would you get the broadening versus narrowing of assignments, and in some way you got to connect that to families, and I think you got to decide early, like soon, if you want to include the whole family and quality of life as part of this issue, or whether you want to just narrowly focus on regional expertise for the technical performance of duty. I think the idea of family stability and quality of life is absolutely crucial, and so I would not be offended if you went that way. So this is part of talent management as well, because it gets to motivations and satisfaction with lifestyles, which makes us a better force, because we can attract and retain people that are supported by the lifestyle. So this is a chance to get that holistic view. You might take a look at what the talent management task force is thinking on on the contribution of quality of life to managing the force as well. So this should be fun. And exactly nobody would argue with your decision to avoid the signal branch at all costs, because nothing good ever comes out of them. Next.
For Major Bayhart here, Avi Bayhart. So problem I selected was the infantry brigade combat team lacks organic troop transportation capabilities. And what that does is it leaves it reliant on an already overextended troop transportation capability that's provided at the division sustainment brigade. And that exposes the brigade commander to potentially unmitigated shortfalls. And so why it's important, so organic troop transportation capability, especially at the BCT level, gives the commander the opportunity to better conduct certain tactical tasks without having to rely on logistics support that is echeloned potentially 5 or 6 levels removed from him or her. And so what we achieve, so if you talk about prolonging endurance, extending operational reach, and enabling freedom of action, that commander having those organic troop movement capabilities allows him to do just that. Right now, based on Army doctrine, the IBCT cannot move itself without support. And so what we risk if we don't reallocate those assets back down to the BSB and below is that IBCT commander may be unable to react to the offense and the defense, for example, during a pursuit, or an exploitation or a retrograde, especially when you have to wait on logistics assets that, again, are potentially 5 echelons above you. And so how do you solve this problem? So in my opinion, kind of go back to the old ways of giving the force support companies and the Alpha Distribution Company, giving them back those organic troop transportation capabilities in order to enable more responsive, direct, and habitual troop movement support. You don't necessarily need to bring more trucks or more operators, you just reallocate them from the assets at the division sustainment brigade back down to the brigade support battalion. Over.
Yeah, so this is the age-old asset allocation problem of transportation in the force. There's a risk to the force if you're not mobile. There's a risk to the mission if I have combat power, but I can't get it to the decisive point. This is exacerbated on a nonlinear, non-continuous battlefield in which unit operational areas are continuing to expand because of lethality and C2. So the terrain that a BCT controls today, is 10 times greater than what it was in previous wars. And so IBCT guys, again, too light to fight, too slow to move, need rocket sleds to move them around. So traditionally, we've solved this problem by assigning in the Army of Excellence divisional design, when we had fixed divisions, there was one truck company at the division level. There was and that works down to about, you need a truck platoon to support a brigade and a truck squad to move a battalion. At the division level, that one truck company could support the entire division because the transportation mission would move around the division at times. Sometimes he had to be helping the main support battalion move. Other times he was moving a BCT around, giving them additional support. So the principle was that we should have just enough trucks so that they're always being used, and then we will manage that asset using general support or direct support to move them to the highest priority transportation mission. That what you didn't want to do was take that truck company at the division level and then break him down into 10 squads and then assign that squad to individual battalions, because most of the time those infantry battalions don't need trucks. When they're digging in, they don't need trucks. And so when you start looking at the demand cycle, you realize that's not a continuous signal, but there are times in which you need a lot of trucks and I need them now, but for a short duration. And then I don't need any trucks until I need them again. So in that interval, if I have assigned trucks, then I'm wasting that asset. Now the Army is already 60 truck companies short. When we do total Army analysis and take a look at the transportation mission, there's justified truck missions in excess of our capacity. So the risk that we have across the force in all scenarios is about 60 truck companies. So I can't afford 60 truck companies because that's 150 guys times 60. That's about 10,000 slots needed for trucks. So this will be an interesting exercise in analyzing the transportation requirements for the IBCT and then coming up with different solutions on where to station and how to support. If we're going back towards a fixed divisional organizations, I can maybe satisfy things at the division level and give a brigade trucks when he needs them, and then not encumber him with the sustainment and maintenance mission of those trucks. So that's an interesting one to consider. Okay, so looking forward to that one. How to manage a pooled asset. This is exactly what chiefs of staff do, and asset managers, and this gets into command and support relationships and how we organize the battlefield for this important function. So this one should be fun. Thank you. Next, what I propose to do is just drive on all the way through these, take a break at your level as you need it, and then I'll just, that way we'll get best use of your time. Next.
Hi, sir. Captain Andrew Mellon, coming in clear?
Loud and clear, sir.
Okay. So I'll just go through my process first. So I originally had a talent management idea, and in the discussions yesterday for our small group breakout session, I actually brought it up and we discussed it. I saw better ideas from other folks. I couldn't defend my idea that well, and so I took a step back and reevaluated my idea. Took some time and let it come to me of had 3-4 years ago, and that's where I came up with this one. So the problem I'm attacking is the current engineer force structure and allocation between the active side and the guard reserve side leaves the overall Army vulnerable to in a peer fight, specifically gap crossing and defense. So over 70% of the engineer force remains in National Guard and Reserve, and those assets can't mobilize quickly. The global war on terror has forced kind of a lot of 12 Bravos into the clearance companies, and that diverts combat power away from the SAPR companies and the mobility augmentation companies. Additionally, there are divisions that do not have an echelon above brigade engineer battalion co-located with them for training and integration. So my solution that I'm trying to cover is that we should reallocate what units are active, which ones are guard reserve, pushing the clearance companies to the reserve and guard mission, and pulling more mobility and counter mobility assets to the active force, and staging them with divisions, so the divisions can train with them, integrate with them, and be able to rapidly deploy and be ready to fight a near peer.
I like it. So in the late 90s and the 2000s, there was this thing called modularity, in which we were trying to increase the force structure inside organic brigades. And so we stood down a number of fixed division force structure to be bill payers to come up with the additional slots we needed inside maneuver brigades. And so the headquarters units and some of the force structure of the engineer brigade, the division artillery, and the division support command were used to fund the numbers that were needed to give us an increase size in the BCTs because we were deploying brigades and not full divisions. Well, that's now come back to roost because now it looks like we're moving back towards the division as the warfighting echelon and not the brigade. Then some of the risks that we took in the engineer force, for example, are coming to roost. And we think the LISCO demands on engineer forces are different than those when you're fighting stability. So the protection and mobility functions are needed in the active force, and so you're going to be exploring processes to realign forces among the compos and then aligning battlefield missions among the compos in a way to more equitably distribute the capabilities. There may be some additional equipment and manpower and percentage of the force issues that come about, but there's probably a pretty good argument for what you're talking about in terms of manning, stationing, and doctrinal assessment. So this will be an interesting connection between how warfighting concepts change and the way we propose to fight then drives force structure and resourcing decisions in the force. So this one should also be a lot of fun. Okay, thank you.
All right, good afternoon, sir.
Next, please.
Team. This is Captain Andrew Hoffman. So basically, with my problem set, before I get into that, talk a little bit about the peer review. So Jenna did review mine. I appreciate her feedback. Kind of just let me see where I was missing some gaps. But unwillingly, I actually had a chance to talk to Will and bounce my ideas off him as far as what he thought about my topic. And he played devil's advocate, and it kind of made me reframe and think about how I was going to approach this problem. So big thing that I think that the Army needs to overcome is what they do is they overutilize the 2 up, 1 down rule, and I believe it greatly hinders the career progression of our junior soldiers, but also forces them into roles that they may or may not be ready for maturely in any aspect. So when you're looking at a career progression and you're sending someone into a position that's 2 up, potentially they may have all the talent in the world, yet they may not have the background or the backbone to facilitate what is demanded of them at that point in time. So where a lot of this comes from in my observations in the field of this is I've had I was fortunate enough to work as a battalion S1 within FA, infantry, armor, and then also with aviation. So I've seen all walks of life. And I could tell you whenever a division came down to the sergeant majors and stated that they must decide which of these positions and their NCO ranks they wish to downgrade to a position, there was never an instance in which a sergeant major says, I can downgrade to said position. So example, sergeant first class to a staff sergeant. It was almost like a force-willed thing, like, hey, you will do such thing. So when I was a HR company commander, it also, I had that aspect of the 2 up, 1 down, but I also learned with the 2 up, 1 down, when you're talking about these companies that have these specialized missions, that the 2 up, 1 down rule is not a cookie cutter thing across the Army, because when you're talking about QSIs, ASIs, or certain skill sets that are needed in order to accomplish a deployed mission, the rule is not facilitated. So when I looked at the back when I was in Captain's Career Course, I remember as a first lieutenant promotable, I looked at the fiscal year manning guidance for 13 to 15. And one of the things I realized is that in the manning guidance, it stated that there was enough personnel in the Army to fill every single requisite that was on MTO or TDA. So that made me question, then why would we have a staff sergeant filling in a platoon sergeant role if that was the case? So overall, what I'm looking, to really get out of this is that I believe that it is tied to retention. My time in Cadet Command, I see that we're allowing individuals and doing waivers for cadets that have maybe 2, 3, 4 misdemeanors, some serious drug charges, and yet we're doing waivers on them. Penny, questions or feedback, sir? That's all I got.
Yeah, this raises the perennial problem that the Army faces, that when outsiders look at our rules and say, are we even serious about what the things that we say. We say, hey, I've got to have a sergeant first class in this position. I just have to have it because only a sergeant first class has the requisite experience, skills, background, knowledge to be able to really perform that mission reliably. And then we make we make those kinds of claims all the time. But then when we go through the shell game and the juggling of people and assignments for readiness purposes, nobody wants to say, hey, I'm not ready to accomplish the mission with the resources you've given me. So we evolved this policy that says you can assign people 2 up and 1 down. And then if in your qualitative judgment, if you can still perform the mission, then I guess we can still say that that's ready. Well, if you look at a battalion or a brigade level and you got hundreds, if not 1,000 guys that are not matched up properly with skills and grade, and yet we still say the unit is fully mission capable. It isn't. Is that even a serious statement? If there can be that much variance between the objective requirement and what we end up fielding, but we still say that it's okay and good to go, then how can we take any statement seriously that says, hey, I got to have this or I'm going to fail my mission? Well, we haven't failed it yet. We somehow find a way to get it done. We just muddle through. So the Army has a cultural problem with being taken seriously in the building and in the halls of Congress, because it often seems like we're speaking out of both sides of our mouth. So this is a chance for you to take a look at how manning guidance and strategic policy is formed, what the impact is down to when it cascades down to the tactical level, and you'll have a chance to explore that in the strategic readiness system and unit readiness, and how we actually decide that we're ready to accomplish missions. I mean, this matters at some point every time on the radio at the battle update brief, and the commander asks, hey, what's your mission accomplishment status? Hey, sir, we're green, we're good to go, you can count on me to accomplish the mission. We have to make those kinds of integrated qualitative judgments all the time about, do we have what we need to accomplish the mission? So this is just one manifestation of that, how we think about, are my leaders really competent for the missions that I'm giving them? Standards of grade and manning guidance is part of that, but it does come down to, in some cases, professional judgment about mission readiness. So this one should be of interest, and I think everybody would also agree that Will can be a real problem when it comes to peer review. So it wouldn't surprise me to see you steering clear of his tough way with people. At least that's what everybody else says. Will. Just kidding. All right, next, please.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, team. I am going to talk about the problem with how the FSCs and the BSBs are aligned. Listening to some of my peers, they're talking just the opposite of what I'm going to say. So here we go. As the Army prepares for future wars against near-peer threats, the need to address sustainment across the force requires attention. Often FSCs are undermanned, not enough equipment, or ill-equipped, and I think that sometimes the FSCs lack institutional knowledge on how to properly provide that support to the maneuver battalion. I think under current modernization efforts, most of the support functions should be realigned back under the BSB. The reason I say that, back under the BSB, as Army continues to modernize remaining maintenance assets should also be pulled back under the BSB. I think that the sustainment brigade should keep its same functions. And as I was reading some of the ATPs under the BSB concept, some of the BSB functions can move back to the sustainment brigade, and we can make those as the BSB can be more lethal as you provide better support to the maneuver battalion if it was controlled there, due to the fact that you have those functions in the BSB, like a support, the SPO is there. The SPO has a very diverse staff in order to look at the problem set and provide the right support to the maneuver battalion as required. That's all I have.
Yeah, so this really is similar to the idea of the truck transportation problem, and that is, where do I station the capability based on how it is that I think I want to fight? When we had a fixed divisional base, we used to have 5 battalions in the division support command, and we had the ability to turn wrenches back at the divisional base. We had brigade support battalions where we had the ability to do pass back maintenance. And then we had the equivalent of forward support companies where we could do forward repair and then some unit mechanics. And so we had 4 different locations where we were performing the battlefield function of maintenance. In order to reduce personnel costs and to unburden some of the maneuver commanders, we started moving unit mechanics out of the unit and then aligning them with the FSC. We got rid of the divisional support command, and a lot of those MOSs and functions moved up into the BSB and the FSC. So it's really a question of where you want to place the asset. Right now, we don't have DS overflow maintenance in the BSB or the divisional base for tank mechanics. Any tank that's going to be repaired is going to be with mechanics that are assigned to the FSC. So there is no pass back maintenance like we used to have. That's one of the consequences of a doctrinal decision to go to a 2-level maintenance. So one of the things that you're looking at is how to array those capabilities on the battlefield by location. That's going to be connected to how we propose to fight. So you'll see this not only from a force in that where we station forces and how we fight our concepts. So we got a little disconnected in there. So just to recap, this is similar to the truck location, the truck allocation. Let's try that again. How are we doing now? So this is similar to the where we station trucks to support the force, and it's connected to the doctrine of how we propose to fight. So I'm looking forward to this one. I've watched us chase our tail on this one for almost 40 years, so I will be interested to see how you try to skin this cat. Okay. Next, please. And Jenna, I'm counting on you to tell us when we're done. Here's what I want to propose. It's 10:06. Here's what I propose that we do. I want to give you a 20-minute break now so that you can be ready and reset for your 10:30 class. Anybody that didn't get a chance to talk on this one, we will do in the afternoon, the 173. I'm satisfied with the verbal briefings that you guys have given me so far, so I don't see a need for an additional 2-minute drill. You just practice that on your own. You don't need our time to listen to you rehearse. So with your permission, my intention in 173 is there's a couple things I want to talk about with the Toolman model and so forth, and that way we will use the time for 173 in the afternoon to answer any specific questions you have, to hear the balance of the individual briefings like we've done so far, and then I'll cover a few topics, and then I'll get you out of here a little bit early with your mission.
Hey, Doc.
Yeah, Pete, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, you're on a good roll, and it's not a big deal. We can adjust either way if you want to give them the break now. I'm listening in, and as you guys are going through, so if you complete, because ours, I think my portion will go, I think, relatively fast. So, if you'd like that, I offer that to you, Ken.
Hey, Jen, I'll let you guys make that call. If we do 2 more, and then I have about 10 minutes of material on the Toolman model, then I will be wheels up, mission complete, and then we won't even. We will merge 173 into this one. So
I was just going to say, if you prefer to do that, Doc, I mean, that's too easy for me. And that way, we just need to just, because I saw the 173 as well. So it's up to you. But I think while you have them in this space, I think it's a better transition than jerking them around on, Gordian knot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to jerking around just for the principle that education is pain, and so we should always induce pain whenever possible. The learning value is enormous. So let's do that, Jenna. Let's knock out the next two. I have about 10 minutes of material to cover. We'll give you the break that you need, and then Mr. M will pick up, and then when he's done, then we'll all be done. Does that sound fair? Hearing no objection, I gotta grab 2 more 5x8 cards here, and then off we go. Let's drive on.
Sir, Glenn Dron here. So I collaborated with my small group of 4. So Andrew, Kevin, and Josh, and the pre-writing technique I used was making a list. So I essentially just bulletized what I wanted to discuss, looking through the lens of a couple different issues that I wanted to get across in the writing. And then my problem statement is how can the Army Reserve MI community efficiently execute individual readiness with team and collective training? So over the last several years, when individual readiness from SecDef all the way down through the forces has been the number 1 priority, it's been a challenge for us in the MI Reserve community to actually balance individual readiness, so evals, dental, PHA, with individual training such as weapons qual, team training, 350-1 training, and then do intel production. So we have our reservists are contractually required to serve 38 days a year. So we have to do all that within 38 days a year. So that's typically the 2 days a month and 2 weeks during the summer model, which for Army Reserve MI does not work because we have many of our units have real world production missions. They either do during traditional drill periods or they come in on Title 10 orders, supporting INSCOM TIBs, other INSCOM units, as well as DIA units. So it's understood that readiness is the priority, but our Compo 1 partners also look to us to do that production. And so what I wanted to look at is how to become more efficient, understanding the budgetary and logistical constraints, and essentially get out of that traditional 2 days a month and 2 weeks during the summer model. And units that have been in the past, we've done 4-day drills, we've stacked drills, because we want to continue that no cold starts mindset that former DAG2 General Legier talked about several years ago, because our reservists do deploy quite often to CENTCOM and other AOs. And so that's pretty much all I've got, sir. Any of your questions?
Yeah, I was told there would be no math. So this is the real challenge of the trade-off decision between readiness and training for some future mission and the need to have actual production right now. So this is probably as good a time as any to cover that. And this is the idea of the golden nugget. So here's the golden nugget. This is your first golden nugget for the year. So majors get paid about 85 grand a year. If you use a 2-to-1 direct to indirect cost, My initial estimate was that it cost the Army $250K to have a major here for a full year. I then contacted DAG8 and found the guy who runs the personnel cost numbers for the Chief of Staff of the Army, who has to report on what it costs to field an Army to Congress, and then that becomes the basis for how we get resources. So I asked that guy, what is the fully burdened cost? A fully burdened cost is a concept which says if you total up all the direct and indirect costs, you get a fully burdened cost. So if I'm delivering fuel to a tank, there's the cost of the gallon of gas. I have to buy the gas to fill up the tank. I have to pay for the trucks that are going to carry it. I have to pay the soldier who drives the truck. I have to pay for the MP who's going to guard the truck. I have to pay for the mechanics who are going to fix the MP's truck that's guarding the fuel truck. I have to pay for the cooks to create the food, to feed the mechanics, to fix the MP, to guard the truck, to deliver the fuel, etc. It's like the house that Jack built. So it turns out that during the war, it cost something like $35 a gallon of fully burdened cost to deliver 1 gallon of gas to a tank. The cost to Department of Defense for that gallon of gas was $3. So 90%, actually 95% of the cost of delivering fuel was something other than the fuel. So when I look at this as a supply chain, if there's things that I can do to reduce some of these incremental costs, then I can reduce the fully burdened cost. So the fully burdened cost was what I asked Department of the Army G8 was. I said, what is the fully burdened cost to the Army to have a major at CGSC for a whole year? A week later, he came back and he told me it was $250,000. And I said, prove it. So he gave me a list of all the direct and indirect costs that the Army cost model uses to keep a major on duty for a full year. That list came out to $250K. So the 2-to-1 rule of thumb turns out to be a pretty good way to estimate the fully burdened cost. So, except for this stupid year, officers would be here for 50 weeks, and they're in the classroom 5 days a week, so that's 250 class days to accomplish the educational mission, and we're paying $250,000. So that turns out to be $1,000 a day to have a major being educated. $1,000 a day. At the time, gold was $1,000 an ounce. So every day it was costing us an ounce of gold just to put a major in a seat. And the majors that come here on average are going to serve an additional 10 years. So if I take you out of production for 1 year, that means I'm going to train and develop you for 1 year, and then I have 9 years of production. Why is that a good idea? It must be because the improvement in your performance after a year of preparation makes you better on those 9 years of production. So the improvement to you as a machine of making readiness and combat power, it turns out that you have to be 12% better at graduation so that the compounded annual improvement offsets the year that we lost to production by having you here. So my argument would be that if you experience a full year of CGSC, there's no way that you can not get 12% better. It's basically impossible. So I want you to remove all doubt that this is a good expenditure of your time. But that's what it costs of the nation every day, did you learn something that was worth $1,000? If you haven't, find me and I'll torture you on behalf of the nation so that we feel like we're getting our money's worth. So if you don't learn anything, at least we can beat you up and feel like we're getting a good deal. So that's really the same issue that we have here on the readiness and training versus production. The argument is that if we don't ever train you, then the production you give us is going to be crap. But if all we ever do is have you produce, then you're never going to get better on any of the other skills. So this is going to be a way for us to take a look at the supply chain of producing readiness, and we'll see what you can come up with. So this is the first golden nugget that I hope to issue to you this whole year. If you can learn to think systematically and econometrically, then you are a field grade officer. Here's how this works. If that was one of the golden nuggets that you learned this year, you get down to a unit, and when you're the battalion XO and you're getting ready to leave for the day, you stop by the staff duty officer's office and you see the staff duty driver, he's reading Hot Rod magazine. And you say, hey, instead of reading Hot Rod magazine, how about you read the study guide to Sergeant E5? And then I'm going to quiz you in the morning when I come back in. And then you take the staff duty NCO and you say, I want you in your additional duty to tell me one thing that we can do better for the battalion to pass command inspection program based on your deep knowledge of your additional duty. And as the battalion XO, I can turn that into an improvement. And then you take that lieutenant and you say, hey, lieutenant, here's the current edition of Military Review. I've read it and I know what's in it. I want you to find the most interesting article in there and you get ready to summarize it, because when you brief the old man tomorrow, you're gonna tell him something about what you read. You're gonna rehearse it with me so you don't go in there and show your ass, but you're gonna brief the boss in a 3-minute stand-up on something you read in Military Review so he can see that you're a smart guy. If you did that every day for 250 days in the year to 3 individuals every night, you would have touched the lives of 750 soldiers in your unit. Some of them are going to get better as a result of that little nudge that you gave them. So if you can figure out how to make a micro improvement in a systematic way and then leverage that across the organization, the return on investment would be enormous. Now, I want you to think about that as a golden nugget. Imagine I told that to 1,000 officers, well, not 1,000, 100 officers every year for 20 years. I've told that story to 2,000 officers. Some of them took that forward and made a difference in how they performed their duties as battalion XOs. And they may have taught other officers under their command. So possibility for positive change, that story is compounded interest. It's the most powerful force in the universe. So the things that you think and you say and you write and you do, leveraged enough, can change the Army and can change the world. And you just got to believe that that's true, and then you got to act as if that is true. So the things that you think about, that you write about, and in your daily practice have an uncalculable return on investment. So the $1,000 a day to have you guys in the classroom to maybe pick up, hey, I'd like you to get one golden nugget a day, but I'd settle for a golden nugget a week. If you could leave this year with 50 big ideas just like that and take them forward into the rest of your career, here's the beauty of it. When you pay that golden nugget forward, you get the golden nugget back. You may have said something that changed that lieutenant's life and the way he looked at time management and saw he now understands how to seize an opportunity and not waste time and how to get the most training out of every possible minute. Maybe that's something that we need to do with the MI, Glenn, and figure out how to get better use out of those 38 days. There's probably a lot of inefficiency in there because we tolerate coming in and bullshitting around for a couple hours before we actually get started. We do that 12 times a year. That's 12 days wasted probably right there. So I'm really interested to see how you think we might be able to reorganize the time to have more payoff in both production and in training. So that's your golden nugget for today. So don't let me walk into the room and see you sitting around reading a newspaper, because on behalf of the nation, I'm going to come over there and demand to see your golden nugget for today, or I'm going to torture you. That's because we're taking money from people's retirement accounts in order to fund this army, to fund this school, to fund this classroom. And God forbid we are not good stewards of the nation's treasure. They trust us with the soldiers' lives and readiness and money to do that job. And that's what our professional oath is all about. So that's $1,000 a day. So here's how I implement that. Whenever we get a new DC, I usually go find them and I tell them in about 1 minute, sir, the fully burdened cost of a major per day in this building is $1,000. So we've got to make sure that every day we're getting our money's worth out of this program. Now, every general officer understands what the fully burdened cost is. And when I make it a dramatic point like that, that analogy gives them the ability to make interesting speeches to decision makers and policymakers. So a well-chosen analogy or well-chosen metaphor or a nicely told story can be a very powerful force for good. So that's my golden nugget for you today. And that's what I was going to cover after we get through this final briefing. So I feel like we didn't waste any time. So that's your golden nugget for today. Next, who's bringing us home?
All the way, sir.
Oh,
So,
all right, Jenna. All right, Jenna. Go ahead.
morning, sir. So one of the biggest problems I see within the airborne beat utilization of small manned aerial systems for the intelligence to answer information requirements. It's lacking in 3 areas particularly: program management, doctrinal review, and overall asset maintenance. One of the reasons this is so critical, sir, is because as we talk about the application of SUAS, as I'll refer to it, in the combat environment, first, just looking at program management and the structure of these by MTO, it's all broken down into rifle companies. However, the BCT, the average infantry battalion, it has about 5 companies. So we're completely disregarding our logisticians and we're disregarding the HAC, which is where significant intel capability from your reconnaissance, your scouts, and your fires, your mortar teams exist. Not leveraging those assets by distributing out to them actually significantly impacts the maneuverability that commanders have across the battlefield and within their operational area. I would argue that company level ISR produces bottom up information that drives the brigade and the brigades drives the division. However, without that, the impact is that in addition to failing the maneuverability of forces, we generate a dependency on higher headquarters for information, and that's the wrong answer. So if the Army is not able to address this issue beyond MTO requirement, we're allowing force structure to overshadow mission requirement. Denying support assets to maneuver commanders, it degrades surveillance and reconnaissance and slows the intelligence process altogether when we talk about assess, process, analyze, disseminate, and overall, the asset allocation shortages compromise the mission planning process as well. And it doesn't give us the advantage that we need to leverage over the enemy. In addition to that, sir, if we integrate these assets across the warfighting functions, we now enable during the mission planning process and beyond, as it's a living mission planning process is living as we're fighting in the environment. It allows each warfighting function to leverage the benefits of the UAS platforms, particularly instances for signal and locating retrans sites, to determine suitable areas for commanders to set up operations, knowing that they won't face communications limitations. As logistics, it gives those early warnings and indicators, along with looking at route reconnaissance, so we know where our logisticians need to be positioned with forces to sustain the fight. I would posit, sir, that the immediate solution to remedy this asset shortage is reallocating platforms across the immediate battalion footprints, possibly pulling them out of unnecessary areas of concentration like the heavy weapons companies and redistributing them to the HSCs or wherever the scout platoons and 13 Foxes, our mortarmen, are, because that's going to allow us to maximize fires, which at the end of the day, we talk about fires as the king of battle. Even if it's an 80 Mike mortar, that maximizes that commander's ability to maneuver his platoons across the battlefield and be successful. Other than that, sir, I would also like to offer that in mentioning doctrine review, that while there is a force projection out there right now from the Army that pushes between 2010 to 2035, the necessity for a solution to surface quicker is driven by the fact that our hybridized warfare that we're currently fighting has shown that we are not as effective in utilizing all of our warfighting capabilities without efficient and effective platforms that can be utilized by almost anybody. The amount of time that we're investing in training is somewhat irrelevant if the human factor continues to utilize these assets. A gunner, for example, cannot be the end state for operating a system because his cruiser weapon system is critical to the commander for success. And therefore, we need to start looking across our formations and incorporating other individuals into this training program. Pending any questions you have on that, sir, that's my immediate brief.
Yeah, so I suppose you take the position that intelligence is important and everybody should have some. Yeah, that's typical. If Intel does have an operational process and every commander has an operational process, it would only make sense that if we had a low-cost, reliable, redundant, pure fleet of information collection capability, whether it's a UAV or it's a robot, that every field unit would benefit from improved situational awareness, and then we could scale that across the force. We could then actually reposition assets as needed in the same way that we want a single family of trucks. We probably want a single family of intel collection. That would, especially if you can then start networking that, you get an immediate input into the enterprise common operating picture through distributed asset collection. And then it almost doesn't matter who owns it specifically, but if we solve the network integration and then using AI to process the enterprise site picture, then we'd be in much better shape. So I'm with you on that one. I like the idea of program management, doctrine review, and then managing the asset. All three of those are areas in which Muda can be found. Muda is the Japanese word for waste, comes from the idea of the Toyota production system, in which they are relentlessly looking to get the most out of every asset that they have. So Toyota actually studies how much they spend to ship air. So when they're packaging up their parts to send things around, they take a look at the wasted space inside of the box, and then they allocate the cost of shipping that much air. So they actually measure that. So waste can be found everywhere and anywhere, and all of those can lead to more efficient performance. That's the micro improvements to processes that goes hand in hand with the macro improvement to processes. When we're trying to get the big right, we're also trying to get the little picture right. So you can combine both grand operational strategy and tactical efficiency together. You get the best possible payoff. So this one should be a lot of fun. I am especially interested this year in figuring out how to conduct the force protection battle in sustainment support areas at the brigade and division level. And so I would expect this to be connected to that in some way as we figure out what does it take the consolidation area security forces, what do we have to give them so that they can actually gather and then process the information to understand the battle. Because if we don't understand that, we run the risk of putting too much combat power back there for too little threat, or we run the risk of missing the threat altogether and being exposed because we didn't know they were there. So getting the intel collection piece right is not just for maneuver commanders, but it is also an integral component of force protection across the battle space. So there we are. The consolidation area. Yeah, Pete. All right, next.
Sir, Kevin Ahern here. My problem statement is the Army infantry weapons companies and light infantry battalions do not have proper manning or equipment to perform the primary duty expected of them, which is to serve as their battalion's organic anti-tank and anti-helicopter element. There's not enough soldiers in the infantry weapons platoon to accommodate for a driver, a truck commander, a gunner, and a tow missile retriever for each ITAS tow Humvee. Currently, tow gunners are required to dismount, retrieve a missile out of the trunk of a Humvee, place the missile on top of the Humvee, remount the ITAS turret, load the missile, and then fire it to deploy any subsequent tow missiles after the initial round that's in the tube is fired. Additionally, there's not enough organic headquarters vehicles to transport an entire infantry weapons company headquarters element. And this is especially problematic given that infantry battalions have lost their, or the FSCs attached to infantry battalions lost their trans platoons about 5 years ago-ish. So providing extra manning and equipment to these companies is going to allow them to more effectively perform their primary purpose of serving as the anti-tank and anti-helicopter elements for their for light infantry battalions, and it's going to allow them to transport their entire elements organically. If not addressed, weapons companies will continue to have to borrow non-organic vehicles from an already vehicle-constrained light infantry battalion to transport their entire elements, and they'll have to deploy tow missiles at a substantially. They'll have to employ tow missiles at a substantially lower rate than they would if they had adequate manning.
Great stuff. So this is connected to a similar problem, and that is what is the optimal infantry rifle platoon? All right. So this has only been around since Alexander the Great. That's history. So if you talk to the infantry school and center, the proponents, they say that the ideal infantry platoon has 4 9-man squads plus a platoon headquarters. So that would cost you 36 slots per rifle platoon. The next best would be 3 by 9 plus a 5-man weapon squad that has a machine gun squad leader and 2 2-man teams because they can't afford to have 3-man teams. So the firepower of 2 machine guns is the equivalent of a full rifle squad in terms of supporting fires. Now, they can't close with and assault the objective, but they can play the role of your fourth squad providing a base of fire. And so I can save 4 slots by using 3x9 plus 5. Elements, and there's flexibility, and I can rotate the base of fire. But if I can't have 27 slots, I have to go with 2x9 plus 5, which gives me 2 maneuver squads and 1 squad for a base of fire. And if I can't afford that, I can go with 2 9-man squads. So when the Bradley fighting vehicle was first designed, it only had room to carry 22 people across the 4 vehicles. And so you got 18 riflemen plus a 4-man headquarters section. That matters because the difference between 2x9 and 4x9 is 18 slots, and you count how many rifle platoons there are in the Army. A design decision that changes the structure of the infantry rifle platoon has an impact in terms of thousands of spaces among a constrained force structure. We only have 494 or whatever it is now. So some percentage of that is allocated to infantry, some percentage of that is allocated to rifle squads. But you can make the argument that the strength of the nation forces is how many squads that I can fill. So if I can only have 18 soldiers per platoon or 36 soldiers in platoon, there are real significant choices. Now, if you attach this to the idea of the mobility of that platoon, if I give them 1 truck to support the mobility, that's an additional 2 slots per rifle platoon for every platoon in the Army. If I make each platoon bigger, then I can't have as many platoons, and that means each platoon's op tempo increases. And so deciding where to pool the asset or to assign that truck asset really does matter. I can't afford an additional 2 slots for every infantry platoon just to give them a truck in case they need it. I've got to buy just the number of trucks that I want and then pool them and then give him trucks when he needs it. So there's a larger force structure manning issue. There is the design issue of how do I want the platoon to be able to fight, or in your case, the infantry weapons company or the tow platoon. What's the optimal design of that platoon, and what kind of assets could I give them if I was unconstrained? But if I can't afford that many slots across the whole force, I have to start making trade-off decisions when it comes to pooling assets like maintainers, transporters, cooks, intel, and signal, and all that stuff. So this is going to be an exploration in the battle math of the design of the platoon or the company, and then the design of the total force structure. So we're going to see that there are some trade-off decisions that we have to make in order to get mix of forces against a wide variety of scenarios for fighting it. So this is one that I am obviously personally interested in. In a former lifetime, I was the infantry and special operations force integrator for the Force Design Directorate, which was the predecessor of the Army Futures Command. So understanding how these trade-off decisions get made and some of the considerations you make when it comes to designing units to perform battlefield functions is something that I lived and enjoyed. I enjoyed the intellectual challenge. So we'll get a chance to explore that one. Okay, thanks, Kevin. This one should be a lot of fun. I love infantry weapons. It's why we exist. Heavy weapons are better. Do we got one more? Or are we good? All right, so here is the last thing that I want to say. This is what I've been doing on my summer vacation. I want to finish this up with a story about mentoring. So this summer, I have been participating in a true storytelling project. And this is a report out on my experiential learning journey with my mentor, Dr. David Boji. So I met him in 2007 when I was doing my doctoral work. My focus area was the Command and General Staff College. I was interested in seeing how we developed, supported, and deployed initiatives and how we managed change inside this organization. And the methods that I was using included action research, which is learning by doing, experiential learning at the point of the spear, organizational development, which is how we make structural changes to our organizations to perform missions, and then how we actually manage those changes with people. So from 2007 to 2011, I documented and explored 300 opportunities where people had suggested that we might make improvements into the sustainment curriculum and the planning curriculum. And 300 offers in which somebody had an idea, and then some of those offers were accepted, some of them were put into action, some of them had consequences, and I studied that unfolding circus of initiatives. And what I found was that I was examining how does change happen. Second question, how did my teaching practice change if I committed to trust and transparency? Because I'm a pretty savvy guy when it comes to getting my way, and I can play office politics. And so I'm kind of a sneaky bastard when it comes to that, or I have that tendency. And I decided to try honesty, truth, and transparency for a change, just to see if there was anything to it. And so I committed to being transparent about my motives and my design goals. I didn't play politics as much. And I was interested to see what would happen if I exposed myself transparently and trusted others more. And then I was interested in studying how stories and narratives work to make decisions, that a lot of the decisions we make in the Army and in the building had to do with personalities and preferences and persuasion and communication. And so the stories that we tell and the narratives that emerge become very powerful forces. That led me to study complexity. And at that time, around 2007, we had won the conventional fight and we were beginning to explore stability. And one of the things that we recognized was that the people who were best equipped to teach about complexity and uncertainty and stability were the students that were coming out of the theater of war who had lived it every day from their perspective. So there were 10,000 stories about what worked on the battlefield coming through the lived experiences of our students. At the same time, we were exploring, or we were receiving guidance in the form of new doctrine from Department of the Army. Plus, I had my own opinions, and then CGSC had some opinions about how we would teach. And so what happened in the classroom was this potential train wreck or meeting engagement between top-down and bottoms-up ideas about how to handle complexity. And then I had my own teaching practice, and then I had the teaching directives that were coming from CGSC. So in that very fertile and enriched learning laboratory, I studied the concept of voice, which is what happens if we give students more authority to co-create their own educational experience. And that was what my research was about. Well, fast forwarding to the year 2020, I stayed in contact with my mentor, David Boji, who's one of the, if not the world's leading authority on narrative inquiry, critical thinking, storytelling, and so forth. And so he's an old white trash Vietnam vet, freedom fighter, voice of the people. And so we're working on a project of true storytelling to end racism in the world. And so that involves us telling stories and being open and honest. And so one of the big ideas that came out of this was the idea of the walking man, which connected to my insights from action research. So I think of 5 locations of knowledge: head, hands, heart, gut, and feet. The knowledge of your head represents the rational and conceptual pieces of learning. Your heart is the knowledge of your values and identity and what you stand for and the legacy you want to make and leave in the world. The knowledge of your gut dresses fear and uncertainty and the shadow and the risk, and is often the inhibitor to things that we want to do with our better nature. The knowledge of your hands is how to do things and get things done. The knowledge of your feet is what it takes to actually get change done in the world through resilience and repetition and persistence. It takes knowledge of all 5 types in order to make a difference in the world. And when you bring those knowledges into that story circle, where that passion to and commitment to get things better, in order to make that story circle a community learning experience, we need first to create a safe zone, and then we have to learn to build trust and give trust. And then and only then can we really reveal the innermost truth of what we genuinely believe. And then we can take that energizing go forward to take action in the world, and then we can build these collaborative learning teams. So I'm exploring all of these dynamics with him in the true storytelling experience, and I'm relating it to what we go through in our classrooms, what I go through with my soccer team, what I go through with the people that I teach and consult with. And so it turns out that these engagements that we have with each other, where we bring in the 5 knowledges that we have, if we can be open and safe and trusting and truthful with each other, then the possibilities for change in the world are actually unlimited. And it turns out that in the stories that we tell and in the engagements that we have, this unlimited potential is there for new possibilities for the future. So we want to use these story circles and our experiences together to link past, present, and future in a powerful way. That we're in these story circles, these roundabouts, that's an area where we can engage in rest, recovery, relationships, resetting, repurposing, refocusing, and then build up our resilience and our relationships with each other in these roundabouts. That's what we do. That's what this whole year actually represents for you, is a way to do all of those things in a powerful way to change the Army going forward. Every future general officer that we have in the Army typically is going to come to this school in some way. We don't know who they're going to be, and some of you may surprise us. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. All I know is that you guys got a better chance of being a general than Pete or I do. So we're going to treat each and every one of you as a potential seed of positive change over the next 10 years. And that's our golden nugget. That's the golden nugget that I wanted to share with you about what true storytelling means, and the intention that I try to bring to the classroom is finding ways to empower the knowledge of the head, hands, heart, gut, and feet, and in through the stories that we tell. So I am really excited about the array of questions that you guys have. Each and every one of them has the potential for making positive change in the Army. I've seen it happen too many times that I wouldn't be surprised at what's going to come about. I fully expect that the work that we do is specifically going to have an impact on the Army. If I didn't think that, I wouldn't do it. I would not do it if I thought it was a waste of time. I do not see the work that we do has a purpose to create grades. I see that the work that we do is of direct benefit to the profession, and I expect to see that we were going to have payoff, and I insist that we only work on that matter. And I ask you to help me in that, so that if you see things that aren't making sense or it doesn't have a purpose that you can see, then call, throw the flag, so that we can stop the ridiculous things. I will not engage in useless activities. So if it doesn't seem useful, then I'm relying on you to help us see our way through that. And I'm committed to doing things that matter. So I'm really excited about what you guys did. I have 10:51 on the clock. I'd say probably at 11:05. That would give you 15 minutes to get reset and be ready for Mr. M and whatever it is that he proposes to do with this Gordian knot. That almost sounds like history, which is probably going to be a waste of time, but I suppose it could happen. So 11:05.
11:05, people.
Well done, guys.
Good job. Well done. Well done.
Well done.